The former acting attorney general of the United States, Matthew Whitaker. Matthew, good to have you.
Good morning, Neil.
You know what many around the president are saying, there does seem to be a double standard here. You have the case of Andy McCabe, who has lied repeatedly to Congress, gets off the hook, no criminal investigation, no criminal charges, and yet his former national security advisor lying to Congress, facing potentially up to nearly a decade in prison. What do you make of that?
I think there appears to be a double standard in those two cases. They are fundamentally the exact same fact pattern. Andy McCabe was interviewed by FBI investigators, was not truthful, lacked candor, as the IG found out. General Flynn was approached by the FBI at the White House, asked questions, and he was also ultimately determined to not be telling the truth. And so these fact patterns are substantially similar. And this is I was asked just last night by a random person at an airport that said, why is there a double standard at the Department of Justice? And ultimately, Bill Barr is the right person to bring symmetry to these types of cases. And I think ultimately, the General Flynn case is going to be the exemplar where we look at whether or not those that are in contravention to the president are treated differently under this justice system than those that are supportive of the president. I hope that's not the case, and I think ultimately the American people are going to have to be explained to why in one case somebody gets prosecuted and essentially forced to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend themselves, and in another case that person is ultimately not charged with any crimes. And so it's really, Neil, it's concerning, and as somebody that was there both as a U.S. attorney in the Bush administration and as acting attorney general in this Trump administration, I'm concerned long term about the credibility of the Department of Justice.
Do you think that any of this was triggered by the president intervening on the sentence recommendations that were being kicked around by a number of prosecutors, and that this is their effort to say, hands off, we're an independent agency?
I think ultimately this is a misnomer to some extent. It is best if the Department of Justice is allowed to prosecute its criminal cases without interference from politics, but at the same time, all of the Department of Justice power and authority is derivative of the president's executive powers under the Constitution. And so, if the president, as he tweeted about, if he wanted to, he could. It would be bad practice, and of course, many of us would not recommend him doing that. But ultimately, the Department of Justice is part of the executive branch. I don't think at the end of the day that this Roger Stone case is going to turn out. It's a sentencing recommendation. It was a lot of prosecutors I know have said it was excessive in the recommendation, that the enhancements under the sentencing guidelines appeared to be almost draconian in their application. And I think, you look at precedent and other cases of substantially similar fact patterns, and they're usually in the 1 to 3 year range. I mean,
no, you're right. I mean, that has been debated, and there's a very good case to be made for just what you said. But I've talked to a number of prominent Republicans, including Senator John Thune, who said that he'd much prefer if the president quietly relayed that behind the scenes and tweet about it. Attorney General Barr also saying in that ABC interview, as you know by now, that he wished the president wouldn't do this sort of thing. It makes his job a lot tougher. Do you think the president weighing into these matters in a very public way makes the matter worse?
I just think it draws the public's attention to it. The president has been very effective by using Twitter to communicate his messages. Bill Barr was very clear that when he weighs in on criminal cases that are pending and comments about judges, that it makes his job not only difficult but next to impossible. And so, there are certain things that it would, if you were the attorney general, like Bill Barr is currently, you wouldn't want the president weighing in. But at the same time, the president has every right to say what's on his mind, and speak. And again, as the head of the executive branch, that is his prerogative. And this president, I think, has done a lot of positive things with his Twitter account. And there's some times where you wish he wouldn't weigh in, but he does, and that's his nature.
All right, so let's step back here. If you're right about how curious this looks about going after Michael Flynn, not going after Andy McCabe for essentially the same crime of lying, then that would seem to imply that a Justice Department that still more than 3 years into this president has it out for him. Do you think the Justice Department, forget about Bill Barr, has it out for the president?
Ultimately, I don't. I think the Justice Department is best when it wears the white hat and pursues the virtue of justice.
But we just pointed out that double standard, right? I mean,
know,
that does fuel that
that
argument. I've talked to many who feel, yes, it does. It does have it out for him. Do you agree with that?
There are the vast majority of the 110,000 employees, including FBI agents and prosecutors at the Department of Justice, are doing justice neutral and independent of any political bias. Unfortunately, we see very small examples where the facts seem to suggest that there is a political animus towards this president that needs to be eliminated. I think that's what John Durham and Bill Barr are working on, is to root out if there is political animus, to make sure that that is not ever at the Department of Justice. And, I served side by side, for 7 years in 2 different administrations in the Department of Justice. And the rank and file, by and large, 99+% of the men and women of the Department of Justice are just there to do their jobs and to do it without political and just to follow wherever the facts may lead. And that's, I believe that. I think we have to believe that. But there are a few examples here that are concerning, and again, I think need to be better explained by the Department of Justice so that we can understand why these decisions are made, independent of political influence, if that is true.
As you know, Michael Avenatti looks to be going to prison for at least 40 years on charges that he tried to shake down Nike. You're familiar with the story. That's just one of a number of trials he faces. What do you think of the whole thing?
Well, I think this is someone that used their 15 minutes of fame really for their own personal interests and ultimately got over their skis. I mean, it was surprising when other channels would give this person airtime to essentially bash the president, and then also suggest that he was going to ultimately run for president. And
well, do you think those organizations should apologize for having him on?
I think they need to do some soul searching. There are 2 particular channels that gave this guy a lot of airtime to not only criticize the president, but offer really debunk conspiracy theories. And ultimately, this is someone that, because of their lack of a moral compass and not following their legal ethical duties, got themselves in a lot of trouble. And this is someone that I'm sure most American people really don't want to hear from again, or are happy that this was the result for kind of a putting us through that period of time.
All right, Matthew, thank you for taking a good while with us on a Saturday morning.